All righty. So a quick reminder, I think I said it earlier, but you weren't all here yet. Reminder, no class next week, a week from today because of the holiday. There is worship that day, but there is not class. That is also a freebie in terms of sermon notes. If you maybe are thinking, I wonder if I'm caught up on sermon notes, and you're here, that would be a good one to play catch up on, but not required. So speaking of sermon notes, there was a question of how will we be unaffected by all the bad stuff that Jesus described last week. If you caught the sermon from last week, Jesus was talking about some really lousy stuff. But he also says, not a hair of your head will be affected, or not a hair of your head will perish, which seems weird, right? When he even says at one point, some of you will be put to death. Like, huh? Like, strange. But I believe that he's being metaphorical when he says, not a hair of your head will be destroyed. Essentially, the promises of God that are for all of us even overcome death, even go beyond death, and not even death will overcome those promises. So I think that's what he's talking about with that. Who would like to open us with prayer today? Don't know why I'm talking like that. Come on up, Candy.
Mind you, I looked terrible today, so...
That's okay. It's only a few people who will ever see it, unless I post it.
Lord God, thank you for gathering us together this day to learn about your servant David. Thank you for being with David, even though he was an imperfect king. Help us to know that you are with us even when we fall short. Open our minds, hearts, ears, and eyes to learn more about the way in which you bless the whole world. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kennedy. Okay, did you hear name in there a couple of times? David. So who do you think we're going to talk about today? David. Good sense. All right, but before we go forward, we got to back up, right? In the past 2 weeks, we've done things a little bit out of order. Anybody remember what we talked about last week? Moses, specifically what? He received something. The Testament, a.k.a. There's 10 of them, yes, the 10 Commandments. Okay, and that happened very early on in their wanderings, remember? How long did they wander? 40 years. Why did they wander so long? Okay, they were where were they wandering on their way to? The Promised Land. Remember, a few people had gone in and scouted it out. Remember how many people went in and scouted it out? Give you a hint, it's 12. 12. And 2 people thought it was cool. What did the other 10 say? It's terrible. We shouldn't go there. So everyone freaked out, and they're like, "We don't want to go there. We're scared." So God's like, "Fine, stay in the desert till you die. I'm not going to kill you, but stay in the desert till you die." And they all did, right? With the exception of those 2 dudes and Moses. Moses kind of. What eventually happened to Moses?
He took credit for God and then he died.
Yep, he took credit for God. Did he get to see the Promised Land?
Yeah.
He's like, yay, dead. Buried on the mountain. Oh, I don't know why. Okay. Yes. So, now, what was the point of the 10 Commandments? Rules and guidelines to follow. To ensure what? An almost perfect, I like that, an almost perfect existence. Sam, what were you saying? Yep, good. Harmony in our relationship between us and God and us and our neighbors. Okay, who was it intended for? What group of people? The Israelites, right. How did they do with that?
It failed.
How quickly?
5 minutes after.
Instantly. Right. Okay. So who received them? We already said this. Who actually got them? Okay. Now it's good. And why? Because he was in charge, right? Remember the whole gripes go up thing that we were talking about? We talked about that a little bit. You remember what movie I referenced? Anybody remember? Saving Private Ryan? Here's what was ironic about that. I was flipping around on TV. I don't channel surf real often anymore. I usually am just looking for something to stream, but I was actually channel surfing and found that scene on TV. And I was like, oh, it's like a sign. It wasn't, but I thought it was cool. Okay, so when Moses dies, who takes over as new leader?
Jacob?
Not Jacob. Does start with a J, though. Not Joseph, not Jeremiah, though those are all good biblical names. Not Jonah. He was in a whale at that. No, that was way earlier. But I'll give you a hint. It ends with Ashua. Joshua. Did you say that? Sorry. I heard too many people. Okay, so Joshua is leading the people, and after he's led the people for a while, and they've gone into the promised land, what did they do over the course of a generation? They didn't necessarily murder. Well, they probably did murder some people, but they had a lot of battles, right? And a lot of fighting, a lot of different time, a lot of gradually moving in and kind of moving other people out of the area. So they were taking over the promised land that way. Okay, we are going to fast forward quite a long ways today in terms of the history to get to the point where we're going to talk about. Historians place the timing of the Exodus and the 40 years of wandering somewhere in the range of about 1,200 to 1,500 years before Jesus was around. So we kind of got a range. We can't pinpoint exactly. Now, who are we talking about today? King David. He became the king of Israel right around the year 1000 BCE, or maybe BC, you've heard it called before Jesus. About 1,000 years before Jesus, maybe not quite. So we are covering, or we're skipping over a gap of somewhere between like 200 to 500 years today, depending on who you talk to. Now, a lot happened in this time. What did Joshua lead the people to do besides murder? They were angry with all of their brothers, right? Yeah. They were kind of taking over the place. Now, do you think that the people who already lived there were big fans of this idea?
No.
Probably not. There were a lot of different cultures, a lot of different like people groups, tribes, whatever you want to call them, that were living in that area. Some of various sizes, and some were pretty big cultures, some were pretty small ones. There was one that was pretty important, though. You perhaps heard of them before. The Philistines. Have you heard of the Philistines before? I see some nods and I see some confusion, and that's okay. The Philistines were basically just a pretty powerful, like very large clan that were pretty strong, and they were pretty well established. There was one in particular that you might have heard of, especially in terms of David. He was this really tall dude named Goliath. You heard of this name before? Okay, we'll talk about him in a little bit. So Joshua was leading the people until the time of his death. As time marched on, people continued to multiply, as they do. And the Israelites became very, very tribal. Do you remember how many tribes there were? I'll give you a hint. It's 12. My hints are pretty spot on today, aren't they? Yeah, so there were 12 tribes of Israel, one for each son of Jacob. And each tribe was kind of sort of self-controlled. Like there were one big group of people, but they were also smaller groups within the bigger group. Does that make sense? So, for instance, like we're all the United States, but we're also Iowa, right? Yeah, I mean, that's a weird example, but it's the one that came to mind. So same general sensibility. Do you think throughout the entire history, this like 200 to 500 year period that we're talking about, they always remained perfectly 100% faithful to God? Based on our past history, that's probably a big no, right? Yes. Sometimes they were faithful, sometimes they weren't. It's a crapshoot. Depends on what time you're looking with. There was also, even though God had told them, don't intermingle with the native people who live there, do you think they still managed to intermingle with the native people that live there? Yes, there were. They weren't supposed to, but they did, in terms of marriages and also in terms of religion. So sometimes they would kind of mix with a culture that was already there, and that culture had their own religious practices, and things got a little muddled. Ooh, not so great, huh? Yeah, okay. So how's that whole choose to serve the Lord thing working? Does it seem like it's going well? Or it's a little shaky? Yeah, it's definitely a little shaky. They tried to stay true to their heritage, but didn't always accomplish it. And there was actually at various times in the history that we read about in the Old Testament, there were times when they would serve other gods. One big one was Baal, or Baal, or Baal, or how, I don't know. It's spelled B-A'-A-L, which is weird. I always just say Baal, because it sounds like Baal. But the image of Baal was a golden calf. Does that sound familiar? Like maybe we've heard of a golden calf before? Like a generation or 18 in front of that? 18.
Like Moses and
Right.
They put all their like earrings and like weird things in and like made like a calf.
And it was a golden calf, wasn't it? Now they said at that time, this is the image of God, right? But later on, cultures have this other god in the shape of the same thing that's a different name. So maybe, I'm not saying it's the way it is, but maybe some of that influence was already going on in that earlier story. Maybe. Okay. Alrighty. Gradually, a cycle emerged through this period that we're skipping over. The Israelites would abandon God and kind of forget about God. So God's like, fine, like you don't want to hang out with me. I guess I'll just let you do what you're going to do. And God would kind of step back from them, and eventually they would get conquered and controlled by a different group. The Philistines were oftentimes that other group, not always, but oftentimes the Philistines were like, we're going to beat up the Israelites and make them serve us. Fun, right? Yeah, okay. Then the people would be like, this sucks. We're being controlled by someone else. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Wait a minute. I feel like this sort of thing has happened before. Maybe we should cry out to God who we forgot about. Maybe God will remember us. Do you think God would eventually remember them? Yeah, God would remember them. God would deliver them from their enemies, oftentimes by raising up some sort of strong leader. And that leader would then lead the people until they died, and then the cycle would repeat. Do you have any idea what these individuals were known as? These strong leaders that came up. I'll give you a hint. It starts with J. And you often see one in a courtroom wearing a robe. Not a jury, judges. They were called judges. Have you heard of the judges in the Old Testament? You might have heard of some, like the name Samson. Have you heard of Samson? A few of you have heard of Samson. His claim to fame was he was super strong because he never cut his hair, but when he cut his hair, strength went away. Weird. And then they scooped out his eyeballs and killed him. Ah! His story is long and ongoing, and a lot of weird stuff happens. So Samson was one. There was another one named Gideon. Gideon was famous made famous in VeggieTales. Do you guys remember VeggieTales? It probably. Some of you might remember VeggieTales.
Yes.
Maybe. I love the VeggieTales about Gideon because instead of making him a military leader, they make him a band director. And they're all blowing trumpets, which trumpets are actually from the story, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, so Gideon was another one. There was also Deborah. What sounds different about Deborah than Gideon and Samson? Deborah was a woman. There were female judges too, which I think is kind of awesome. And Deborah was like, this guy was like, hey, you're a judge and you're leading us. We have these people who are being kind of jerks. We would like you to come help. And she's like, fine, but if I do this, you don't get any credit for it. And so they go off and they win. And she's like, haha, what's up? It's a little more detailed than that. That's what I can recall at the moment. So, okay. In addition to the judges, who were kind of like military leaders, there were also prophets. Now, have you heard the name prophet before, the word prophet before? Who were the prophets, or what did they do? People who prophesied. I can't fault you for that, yes. What is prophecy? God kind of gives them words to say, right? Sometimes it's in a dream, sometimes it's in a vision, sometimes it seems like they're just talking to each other. Religious fortune telling, that's not wrong. That's not horrible. So, but the prophets I tend to think of as they were acting as the voice of God to humanity. Okay? Sometimes the prophets and the judges would work together. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they actually opposed each other. Kind of sounds like human nature, right? Sometimes we get along. Sometimes we get angry with each other and murder. Because as we've established, there's a lot of murder in the Old Testament, right? Woo, voice crack. That was fun. Okay. Okay. Now, this is bringing us all the way through a whole lot of history to this one dude named Samuel. Now, Samuel had an interesting distinction in terms of judges and prophets in that he was a judge and a prophet. 2-for-1 special. Okay? He was the last judge of Israel in his younger years, but then he got a little older. And if the judges were military leaders, why would him getting old be an issue? You're not strong. You can't fight anymore. Yep. So when he became older, he became strictly a prophet. He's like, I'm going to specialize and only do this one thing now. Also, by this time, the people have grown jealous of all the neighboring nations and kingdoms that are around them. Why? What is unique about a kingdom? There's a king. Oh, okay. Did they have a king? Did the Israelites have a king? No. Who are they supposed to just follow? God. Right. Okay. So they decided we want a king. We're really jealous. They have kings. Kings seem cool. We want a king. So Samuel speaks for God, and God says, "You don't need a king. I'm your king. Like, follow me. I will protect you. It'll be good." But they kept asking, so God gives them a king. The first king of the nation of Israel is a guy named Saul. No. Different dude. Many hundreds of years apart. Okay? About a millennium, actually. He became king in about the year 1000 before Jesus. He was a strong leader, and already he was a strong leader. And so God's like, I like that dude. Samuel, I want you to anoint him. Yes, so, Michael.
This is just a cool thing. I just turned to a page like Samuel 2,
Mm-hmm.
and I just think it's kind of cool because I just turned to this page and we're talking about it.
Yep, and we're going to be there soon. So keep it open. Yeah. Yes. So God's like, I like that Saul dude. Why don't you anoint him as leader? Now, what does it mean to anoint? Any idea? Okay. It's an indication that you have been chosen. Chosen by who? God. Right. Okay. There's a sign for it. Anybody know what the sign is? Not the Holy Spirit, although I know where you're going with that. But you pour something else out on it. Yeah. Anointing with oil. So basically, the prophet, whoever is speaking for God, takes oil and is like, you're cool, God likes you, oil. Kind of. Yes. Yes, they are definitely connected. Yes. Okay. So he pours oil on it. Now, Saul was king for a long time. Take a guess at how long he was king.
400 years.
He would be really old.
We have a lot of old.
You're right. You're right. Take a zero off. 40. He was king for 40 years. During Saul's time as king, we see David, our main dude today. He comes on the scene, but he's still really young. He's roughly your guys' age. Okay? First time we see him, he is a young boy. Now, if you want to see a map, you can come look at it. I tried to find this map. You can come look if you want.
He tried to unify the 12 tribes.
Yes. So, if you look in here, we've got three different
Yeah, I
colors.
think he did.
The yellow part, that's King Saul's kingdom. So it's actually not that big, right? Okay. Eventually David, and I'm foreshadowing here, David would conquer the green part, and then later someone else would add more to it. Okay, cool. So Saul tried really hard to unify all 12 tribes. Do you think it worked okay for him?
No.
Yes and no. He did okay. He was the first unified leader, but the tribes were still like, yeah, sometimes we like you and sometimes we kind of don't. So we're going to kind of listen to you and kind of not all at the same time. Now, while in many ways he was a good king, he also had some issues. Imagine that. Dude had some issues. At times he gets a little unruly. At times he does some stuff that God really does not like. And Samuel, who speaks for God, gets a little bit ticked off at him. Like, God, why did you choose this guy? Like, he had his moments, but he's kind of a jerk. And we kind of don't like him. Everybody open up to 1 Samuel, not 2nd, 1 Samuel 16. First Samuel chapter 16.
Oh, you're off 16.
What page you got there, Michael?
202.
202 in the Black Bible. Okay, everybody got it? Okay, so where we're at in the history is Saul has been king for a while, but he's having some issues, and Samuel is talking to God. Okay? 1 through 5. Sammy, you want to read that for us?
The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel?
Whoa, what?
No longer
right?
Well, he is and he's not. He's still king, but he's been rejected by God. So what's that probably going to mean in the long run? Okay, continue.
Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. But Samuel said, how can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me. The Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate. Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, did you come in peace? Samuel replied, yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me. Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice.
Okay, so what's God going to do? Saul's out. What's he going to do? Yeah, we're going to choose somebody else. And apparently it's going to be one of the sons of Jesse. Now, Jesse had a whole slug of sons. We'll hear about them more in just a moment. Basically, as they're hanging out there, Samuel and Jesse, Samuel says to Jesse, have your sons come by. I need to take a look at them. And God's going to tell me one of them. And so the first one comes by, the oldest, who's big and beefy. And Samuel's like, oh, this is a good-looking cat. I think he's going to be the one. What's God say? No. Oh, okay. Bummer. Get out of the way. Son number 2 comes by. Samuel's like, yeah, he'll do. What's God say? No. Okay. Fast forward through many, many, many sons. Like all but one. The youngest. Who is who? David. Yeah. Okay. So basically from oldest on down, Samuel continues to see him and God's like, nope, 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 nope. Okay. Zip up to verse 10. We're going to read 10 through 13. Hey, Kyler, how about you hit that one for us?
Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, the Lord has not chosen them. So he asked Jesse, are those all the sons you have? They're still the youngest, Jesse answered, but he is tending the sheep. Samuel sent for him. He will not sit down until he is ready. So he sent and had him brought, and he was ruddy, was a fine appearance, and handsome features. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from the day on the Spirit of the Lord came upon David's power. Samuel then went to Ramah.
Okay, cool. So that's what we hear about. Like all the different sons. No. Are you out of sons? No, I got one more, but he's busy. Yeah, bring him in. They bring him in. And God's like, oh. Now, what do we hear about David other than being the youngest? He's good appearance. Apparently he's handsome. My translation says his eyes are beautiful, which might also be a weird translation of Hebrew that means he looks good to the eyes. I don't know. Like, he's described as being a pretty handsome young cat. Cat? Why am I saying that? That's pretty. I don't know.
Why did Jesse believe that Samuel wasn't just randomly spinning around and choosing someone on random? How did he know that he was actually?
He's been known as the prophet of God for a long time.
Okay.
Like he's known throughout the land as this is the prophet of God.
I was like, if someone just showed up to my house and just randomly chose a kid, I'd be kind of skeptical.
So what you're saying is if I walk up to Bill and say one of your kids is going to be governor, God will tell me who. Bring your kids in.
I feel like you'd just be choosing.
Who would be first? Michael, you're the oldest. I'd be like, he's good. And God would say, no. And since there's only 2 of you, I guess, Sammy, you're going to be governor. Give me some oil, I'll throw it on you.
Governor of what?
I don't know. Governor of awesomeness. I like that. That's fun. Okay, so he's the youngest brother and seems to be the chosen one. Have we heard this type of thing before? Can you think of an example of when the youngest brother was seemingly the chosen one? Joseph. Yeah. Now he was technically second to the youngest, but he was really young, right? Yep. Have we heard some other stories where it's the younger brother who's the one who's chosen?
The 2 sons.
The 2 sons of Abraham?
Yeah.
Yep. also the two sons of Isaac, then Joseph, who's the son of
The brother's gonna murder him.
his brother's going to murder him. No, actually, they seem to get along pretty well in this case. We don't have angst between the brothers like we had with Joseph.
So if you could be sad.
Yep. What is his profession, even though he's young? He's a shepherd. Yes, he cares for the flocks. All right. So look at verse 7. What does God consider when God wants to choose someone?
Do not consider his appearance on his head, for I rejected him.
Keep going.
For the Lord does not look at things man looks at. Man looks at outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.
Ah, okay. So what does God consider? The heart. Yep. David has a heart for God. What does that sound like?
He is faith for God.
I guess it's, I don't know. I can't do that. I'm not an Instagram boyfriend. Sorry, was that out loud? Did I just say that? He has a heart. He has a love for God. David loves God. Okay, so how could he be a good king with absolutely no leadership experience? And he's a kid. Like, he's roughly your guys' age.
He had leadership experience.
How so?
Shepherd.
Oh, what do you mean?
He leads
He leads the sheep. Oh, what else does he do? Takes care of the sheep.
More sheep.
More sheep, yeah. So he cares for the sheep. Okay, but despite our tendency to judge those outward appearances, like we heard in verse 7, God sees how David loves him, and that's who's the one that God chooses. But there's a lot of ground to cover before David actually becomes king. He's been anointed, and if he's anointed, that means he's chosen by God, right? But he doesn't actually get the crown, quote unquote, for a long time. In the next chapter, chapter 17, we have the story of David and Goliath. Remember, we mentioned him before. What happens in the story of David and Goliath? Do you remember?
He takes a slingshot, does it right in the forehead, and then he falls down and he's unconscious.
Okay, yes, that's the gist of it. So basically, Goliath was a Philistine. We have angst between the two groups, between the two kingdoms. And basically, there's two lines across the valley from one another. And every single day they say, both sides send out a champion, and those two champions will fight. And depending on which champion wins, that's who's going to win the battle. Okay? So it's kind of like, rather than all of us fight and all of us die, let's just have two people fight. Okay. Who do you think the champion is for the Philistines? Goliath. Comes out every day for like a month and a half, every single day, as they're just like sitting there in this valley. Like, hi guys, let's fight. Send out your champion. If I beat them, you will be our slaves. If he beats me, we will be your slaves. Does anybody want to fight Goliath? No. Okay. Meanwhile, here's David. I don't know, however old he is. And Jesse, his dad, sends him with some food to go help out his three oldest brothers who are part of the army. Okay? So there's a batch of them. The three oldest ones are in the army. Dad sends some food. So David shows up and he's like, who's this big jerk over here who's yelling all the time? Like, why don't we just go kill him? Like, David's like, what's up? So he's like, let's go kill him. God's on our side. Why would that be a problem? And everybody's afraid. Now, who's king at this moment?
Him.
Samuel.
Not Samuel.
Saul.
Saul. Saul is still king. Saul has said, anyone who goes and fights him and kills him will be second in line in my kingdom, and I will give him my daughter to marry. Who do you think is the one person who's like, okay. David. David's like, this guy's a jerk. God's on our side. Let's go kill him. And everybody's like, hey, you're a kid. And David's like, so? So first, Saul gives him his armor. Now, he's the king. You think his armor's fancy? Yeah, it's fancy. It's heavy. David's like, I can't move. This is stupid. Take the armor off. Takes the armor off. He goes, he's got a sling. You know what a sling is? It's kind of like a slingshot, but it's more like a sling. You like spin it and you throw the rocks with it. He goes and gets rocks. And he goes up to David, or he is David. He goes up to Goliath and he's like, I'm here in the name of the Lord. Hits him here. We hear that the stone sinks into his forehead, which does not sound overly pleasant. It stuns him. He falls down. David takes his sword and cuts his head off.
Oh, yeah.
So who won that battle?
David.
David won. Okay. Now, do you think the Philistines actually honored that thing of like, if you beat us, we'll be your slaves? No, they just ran away. They're like, Goliath just got killed. Let's run away. So they run away. Now David is now highly favored by Saul because, like, hey, good job, man. So Saul promises his daughter to him in marriage. That doesn't happen for a while, but eventually they do get married. And David enters into the service of Saul. Now, he just won a battle. How do you think he's going to serve Saul? Not a feast, though there were feasts. Like, he just won a battle. So what are we going to make him into? A military leader. He's got good military skill, apparently, even though he's only ever been a shepherd. Good with a sling, apparently good with the military.
So this kid is leaving the military.
As he grows. Okay. Let's see. Also, he's good with a musical instrument. Do you know what musical instrument? Not a trumpet. A harp. Yes, he plays the harp. And he plays it so wonderfully that every once in a while, when King Saul, who's tormented by a demon, this is a weird story, but this also happens, the only thing that will calm him down is David playing the harp. So he's got some magic fingers. That's the only thing I can figure out. So he plays the harp. We're like, oh, we love you, David. And everybody's like, oh, we love you, David. You're winning all the battles. And Saul's all of a sudden like, wait, they don't love him. Why don't they love me anymore? So he feels what? Jealous. And if he's jealous, what's he going to try and do to David?
Kill him.
Yes. How many times? A lot. Like over and over and over.
Why do his gut reaction like murder? Like, why don't
Well, if they're dead, they can't challenge you, right?
yeah, but like just like talk to each other. You know,
I'm not gonna talk to someone.
Talking in public.
open communication.
As in open communication. David tries open communication. It doesn't really work very well. Saul's like, I'm going to throw a spear at you. Many times. Fortunately, he's a bad shot. He never hits David, which is good. But keep in mind also, what has happened with David and some oil? He was anointed. So he's been anointed as God's chosen one, all while serving the previously chosen one. Awkward.
But if he kills him, wouldn't that mean he would be a traitor and then everyone would kill Saul? So now they don't have a king.
Oh, that's a good question. If David killed Saul,
No, Saul killed David.
oh, the other way around.
Then Saul would be a traitor, and then they would have to sentence him to death, and then there would be no king.
But do you think that Saul knows that David's been anointed?
If he finds out.
Well,
That's what I was going to say.
and they make sure he never found out. But he doesn't like David's popularity. David is uber popular with the people. Like, everybody's like, we dig this dude. He's such a good leader. He's such a good military guy. I don't know why we're talking like this, but it's fun. We love him. Saul, you're okay. But we love him. Give me my spear. Tries to kill him. Doesn't manage to, but chases him all over the place. Now, here's the other aspect of this. Who does David marry? Saul's daughter. Saul also has a son named Jonathan who's like David's BFF. Like they're like, I love you, man. Like they dig each other. He's married to his daughter, although his daughter doesn't really seem to like him very much. That's another story. But so there's all this different stuff going on. Saul is constantly chasing after David. At one point, actually several points, at one point, Saul goes to sleep in a cave. Unbeknownst to him, David and some of his dudes are in the back end of the cave. Like they're in the same cave. I don't know. They were taking shelter at night because it was cold. I don't know. But they're in a cave. And in the middle of the night, David's like, hey, it's Saul. Spear? Wait, no. This is God's anointed. I can't kill God's anointed. So David refuses to kill him. This happens several times. And then another time, he crawls up and he like cuts off the edge of Saul's robe. And then later shows like, this is how close I was to you. And I didn't kill you. Leave me the heck alone, man. Does Saul leave him alone? No. He goes on and goes on and goes on, all the while getting less popular, while David gets more popular, more and more and more and more, and it goes on and on and on. I already talked about that. Okay. Eventually, they're in a battle, and David's off over here somewhere, and Saul is with some other people, and then the archers shoot their arrows, because you know that's what they shoot. And one of the arrows hits Saul and injures him. And so he's like, oh, this is not good. And he sees the enemies are coming. And he's like, I don't want to get caught and tortured and have them get a hold of me. So he tells his armor bearer, who's the guy who carries this really heavy armor, he's like, take out your sword and kill me. Because I don't want to die at the hands of the enemy. So he's like, kill me. Do you think the armor bearer wants to kill him? No. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So it's described as Saul takes out his sword and falls on it.
Oh, yeah.
What does that sound like? Suicide. He kills himself so that he doesn't fall into the hands of the enemies. Now the armor bearer's like, Saul just killed himself. That's not good for me. So what's he do? He does not put the armor on. He also kills himself.
Wait, so they got their armor?
It's a bad story. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now Saul is dead. So yes, that is the ongoing story through the whole rest of 1 Samuel. This is what's going on between the two. Okay. So there's a lot of really weird angsty tension between Saul and David. But now Saul's dead. So does that instantly mean that, hey, David's in charge? Cool. Who might also think that they should be in charge? Actually, no. Though he would have a claim. There's another son who thinks I should be the one in charge. But do the people really care about Saul and his family anymore? Not really. A few do, but not very many. Who do they really like? So who are they probably going to follow as a whole? And we're going to see the tension kind of go like this, or the allegiance is maybe the better way of saying it. Okay, now at the beginning of 2 Samuel, so that's the next book after 1 Samuel. We got 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. David is anointed king over Judah. Wait, who was Saul king of? Israel. Israel? Judah. Is it the same thing? Or is it part of the same thing? Who was Judah? Do you remember? This is going back a long way. Judah was one of the tribes, okay? Because he was one of the sons, one of Joseph's brothers, actually the oldest. And Judah is the biggest of the tribes. They inhabited the southern portion of the promised land, which was the area that was really controlled by Saul. So the king, or the tribe of Judah, is like, we're recognizing David as king. Everybody else, they're going to take a little bit longer. But the main tribe, the main group of people, the biggest group of people, we like David. Saul's descendants, we don't really care about them. David, lead us. Take a crown. Ping. And it was glorious. So now David is a king. Is he the king? Or is he a king? He's a king. Right. Okay. He's the main king, but he's a king. All right. So as time goes on, we continue to see that allegiance of the people shifting away from Saul's descendants over to David. Everyone get to 2 Samuel chapter 5. Everybody got it? Yep, page 217. Okay, we're going to start at verse 1. Who do I want to read? How about Peyton? Why don't you read first? Start at 1. I'll tell you when to stop.
All the tribes in Israel.
Okay, stop. Who? Who? All the tribes. So just Judah or all of them? Okay, continue.
Came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns."
Oh, okay. So when he was king, who was really in charge? I mean, he was in charge, but who was doing the work? David. So everybody's like, we like you. Continue.
The Lord said to you, "You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a compact with them at Hebron before the Lord. They anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 43 years.
Okay. So David becomes king, and he reigns how long? Sense of a trend? 40, 40. How long do you think the next king's going to last? 40. Yep. After that, things change.
I
But,
was either 4 or 7. It was like a magical biblical number.
or 12.
Yeah.
Or 10.
A lot of
Or 400. Yep. There's a lot of magic numbers. Yes. So he becomes king. Now, initially, he's king in a place called Hebron, or Hebron. And he reigns there, and I forget how many years it's there, maybe like 10 years, something like that, or 7 or something of that nature. But then he's like, wait a second, there's a better place where we could unify the people, and we could set up a new capital. Anybody know what city that might be? Jerusalem. Yes. Jerusalem is pretty close to the center of what his kingdom was at that point. It's actually now it's kind of lopsided in what Israel looks like. But at that time, it was kind of central. And it was also a really important point because there's a mountain there. And that mountain is where Abraham received the covenant. So they think eventually maybe they'll build a temple there. Have you heard of the Temple of Israel? Or the temple in Jerusalem? Yeah. That's why they put it there. Okay. Now, David, what do we remember about David and why God chose him? Other than he's handsome. He has a heart for God. So he serves God. But is he perfect? No. We have learned this already, right?
Oh, he was the like bad guy who like.
We're about to talk about that. Okay. So he is king for a long time. How long? 40 years. So for a long, long time. Now, things go well for him. And eventually, God tells David through a prophet named Nathan. I don't know who this Nathan dude is. Samuel's gone by this point. Through the prophet Nathan, God wants a temple here, but you're not going to build it. David's like, well, what are you telling me for? But he says, your kid's going to build it. Okay? So the next generation will build the temple. Because they're still using the tabernacle. Do you remember the tabernacle? It was the special tent where God would hang out. They're still using that, and it's been a really long time. Okay, now, look at chapter 7, verse 12. We got it. Ainsley, you want to read that for us? Start at verse 12. I'll tell you when to stop. Nope. Nope. Are you in chapter 7? Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry, you were just a verse early.
When your days are over and the rest with your forefathers, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He's the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne for his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with the rod of men, with law inflicted by men. But my love will never be taken away from him as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever.
Okay, that's good. All right, so God is telling David, because of your great love for me, I'm going to do great things through your kid. Anybody know who that kid is? He actually has a lot of kids, but one in particular. It starts with an S. It's not Saul. It's also not Samuel. It ends with Alaman. Solomon. You heard of King Solomon? Wasn't he bad? He had his moments. They all do. He's like, you're going to have a kid named Solomon, and he's going to be great. But before you can have a kid named Solomon, some other icky stuff has to happen. So, how are we doing on time? Yeah. All right, we'll give the abridged version. Okay, so David gets old. And when he gets old, do you think he's still going out and being the great military leader? No. We hear at one point that when in the springtime, when the kings would go out to war. So apparently during the winter, everyone put it on pause. But in the springtime, the people would go out to war. But David stays home in the palace because he's old. He's not really in the point where he wants to be fighting anymore. And one day, as everyone else is apparently out fighting, David is walking around up in the palace, up high, and he looks down over the wall, and he sees a lady taking a bath on the roof.
No, not this
This is a
story.
terrible story.
I know,
This is like the worst
I know.
of last year.
I know. It's weird. It's weird. I don't know why she was taking a bath on the roof. I don't know, but she was. David's like, You see where this is going? Okay. Do I need to fill in the blanks for you?
No.
Okay. All right. So one thing leads to another, and she's pregnant.
What was her name again?
Her name is Bathsheba, which is ironic because she was taking a bath. Sometimes I wonder, did they name her that for a specific reason? I don't know. But okay, so Bathsheba is, not only is she not his wife, she's someone else's wife. This guy named Uriah. Uriah is in the army. So where's Uriah at? He's out fighting. But now David's like, I have an issue here. I have to think fast. So he comes up with the idea, I'm going to have Uriah come home for a little rest and relaxation, fill in blanks, and then everyone will think that it's his kid, and I won't have to worry about it. But Uriah comes home, and he's like, no, why would I can't go home and rest and make merry when all of my friends are still out fighting. So he basically sleeps on his porch, and then comes back to, and so David's like, well, that didn't work. So he comes up with another idea. I got to get Uriah killed. So David writes a letter to the generals saying, I want you to put Uriah on the front line, and when it's about time for battle, everyone back up away from him so he's alone.
Very good.
Because if he's alone, what's going to happen to him?
You get shot.
Not shot, but he's getting, well, maybe with an arrow, but he's probably going to get, like, just hacked down and killed in the battle. Now, did they have the postal service at that time? Did they have UPS? Probably not. So how is David going to get this letter to the generals?
Didn't he deliver?
Who has to go back to the front? Uriah. Uriah carries his own death sentence,
Oh, wait.
not knowing what it is.
They're that reliable.
That's rude, right? Like, so he takes it, and basically this happens, so Uriah gets killed. So David is now an adulterer, and he's also conspired to murder. This is the guy that loves God?
No one knows about it, so.
No one knows it. Well, someone knows about it because they wrote about it. Okay, so essentially, like, things are really not good. And do you think God is happy about this? No. Who's the prophet at the time? Do you remember his name? It's not Samuel. Nathan. Nathan's the prophet. God gives Nathan a message for David. And he says, I want you to go tell David a story. And so Nathan goes and he's like, hey, Dave, we got a jam, man. He says, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a poor man who his only possession was this sheep that he loved. He had the sheep that he loved it so much. And then there was this rich neighbor, and the rich neighbor wanted to have a party for his friends. So he went and he took the sheep, killed it, and prepared it. And he asked David, what should happen to this guy? He should be killed. That's terrible. He stole. He stole from the other one. And Nathan's like, dude, I'm talking about you. Reality sets in. David's like, I messed up big time. He repents, turns back to God. God forgives him, but also says, so, you know, this baby is going to die. And the baby died. However, still not saying that any of this is okay, because it's not. But David then marries Bathsheba. Okay?
Did he divorce the other one?
No, he's got multiple wives. Nice guy, right? So he marries Bathsheba. First baby dies, but eventually she has another baby. Any idea who that baby is? His name starts with an S, and it ends with Alaman. Oh, what will Solomon go on to become? King. Dun, dun, dun. That's next week. She does deserve better. She does. She's a very unwilling participant in this whole thing. So I feel bad for her too. Okay, so we talked about the first two kings of Israel. Do either one of them seem like strong, upright individuals?
At the beginning.
At the beginning, they do, but then they have problems, right? So, what does that tell us about humanity that we talked about before? We all have problems. We have lots and lots of problems. Okay, now, what do both of those guys also have in common in terms of oil? They're anointed, and being anointed means that you are God's chosen one, right? So does God choosing you make you a perfect person? No. And we've seen this before, right? You think we'll see it again? Yes, we will. Okay. What weirded you out today? Everything? Anything in particular? The whole Bathsheba situation? I know,
I hate that story.
yeah, I don't think we ever have to talk about it again.
What we've been doing in the past couple of weeks, it's just been normal.
What?
What we've been doing in the past couple of weeks, it's been normal.
It's been pretty
They
normal?
ate concrete, golden concrete.
Cold concrete.
Yeah. Well, that's what because they
Yep,
got it
yep.
themselves. And then he saw Trump and he died.
Yep.
They murdered like 50,000 people. And then they made an army.
Mm-hmm.
And
I feel bad for the sheep.
Yeah, we'll get into the New Testament. Actually, not very long from now.
I prefer that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I know we are covering a lot of really bloody, not nice history. King David II? I don't think so. Okay.
I can just imagine like when Saul was trying to kill David and like throws the spear and like it goes like this and he's like, that's the 5th time this week. Or like
So, do you think that Saul was just a bad shot, or was David good at dodgeball?
both.
Both?
Maybe God was like,
Maybe God's like, psh. Maybe God, at a blast of his nostrils, it moved the spear. I don't know. Oh yeah, what's like? I didn't account for this weird blast of wind. Okay, maybe so. All right, who wants to pray us out of here?
can we have a conversation with just VeggieTales?
Perhaps
we should watch the Bible.
the
The
Bible.
movie The Bible.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, who wants to pray us out of here? Anyone? I'm not letting you off the hook today. Who's off the hook? Peyton's off the hook. No, Kennedy's off the hook. Sorry. I like to pick on Peyton. I'm going to not pick on Peyton today. I'm going to be nice to Peyton. Ollie. No, you did last week. You're right. Reagan, I'm going to pick on you today.
Thank you for this lesson that we talked about. Amen.
Amen.